What's up, lore masters? Today's video is going to be discussing the events in the Voyager episode Drone. Interestingly, it shows us a possible future where the Borg are benign. It also discusses Starfleet's stance on whether a fetus is a life or not, so downvotes here I come. Let's just get into it. When looking at the Voyager episode Drone, it's hard to not instantly see how much it doesn't make a lot of sense. Luckily, the series you're watching right now is based on Borg lore, so I won't be going much into the episode itself. Long story short, the Doctor's mobile emitter becomes infected with 7 of 9's nanoprobes when an issue with the transporter briefly merges everyone being transported. Of course, these nanoprobes didn't get into the systems of anyone else, and they aren't assimilated, but let's just gloss over that for right now. As stated, the mobile emitter would become infected and assimilated. Unfortunately, the crew of Voyager would not know when something is being assimilated or what it would look like. You know, having all the knowledge from the Battle of Wolf 359, having a Borg on their ship, and even being in Borg space for a small amount of time. This means that they wouldn't have any idea what was going on when looking at a tech that has Borg nanites in it. So without even realizing it, they would leave the mobile emitter alone and have the computer scan it to try to determine the damage that has occurred due to the transporter accident. And lo and behold, the emitter would begin assimilating the computer station it's on. Now here's a question. We know the mobile emitter assimilates this specific station to make a maturation unit, but why did it stop there? The station is hooked into the computer and attached to Voyager, so why not continue assimilation of the entire ship? Why did it stop? I mean, if I wanted to, I could try to theorize that this entire episode was based around giving birth and letting a child grow up and learn who it is. Perhaps the nanites were a part of 7 of 9 and realized that she secretly and subconsciously wants to now have a child. Thus, they create a maturation chamber and birth a new Borg. Perhaps this entire episode is an allegory on how it's okay for women to want to become mothers and how the life of a child inside of you is precious. Or it's just bad writing. I mean either or. In any case, create a maturation chamber it does, and 7 of 9 would be alerted to the presence of another Borg. She moves to alert Chakotay and the bridge, deciding that this information is so important, so vital, she's just going to walk to the bridge versus utilizing her comm badge. Chakotay, of course realizing they are still near Borg space, relatively at least, given transwarp, and that a Borg presence presents a massive threat to the ship, checks that the scanners haven't picked up any Borg and tells them to double those scans, then sends 7 of 9 to medbay like she's having a tummy ache. Look, I get that it's very possible that 7 is having issues with her implants, but the Borg are a really big deal. This is red alert territory until they can be absolutely sure that nothing is going on. It would be better to be at red alert and be wrong than to be caught off guard by a Borg cube. Additionally, I know that their security measures would alert them of intrusion, but they aren't even going to run an internal scan just to be sure. We know that Borg tech will randomly activate and start assimilating things, this episode being a prime example. So why not just run an internal check to be sure? The fact this crew gets home, even with Admiral Insaneway erasing children from the timeline to make it happen, is proof a God exists, and that he hates all of us. So while the crew don't seem to really take the possible incursion of the Borg all that seriously, a Borg incursion occurs. An engineer walks into the science lab and checks on the mobile emitter to find that part of it has been transformed into some form of Borg alcove. He would instantly contact the bridge. He would contact security. He would grab a phaser and fire on it. He would do some fucking thing to save the ship instead of the dumbest action possible. He'd pull out a tricorder and begin scanning the extreme threat to the ship without alerting anyone. While scanning it, tubules would come out and attack the engineer. Unfortunately, he wouldn't be killed, which is exactly what this guy deserves. The Borg tech would take his DNA and begin making a baby. Which finally leads us up to the entire point of this episode. With the DNA, the Borg begin a cloning process, again creating a baby. 7 of 9 would comment that this is not what Borg generally do. They don't create people, they don't have babies. Now, some people have tried to say that this is a retcon or a mistake, stating that in earlier episodes it does show the Borg have maturation chambers. However, I do feel like this can be pretty easily explained. It's likely that the babies found on the Borg cube in the encounter with the Enterprise D were from a culture that had been assimilated by the Borg, that they didn't begin some cloning process until sometime in the future, as this suggests. This would mean that 7 of 9 is correct, that this form of technology, this way of creating clones, isn't how the Borg operates. It would suggest that perhaps cloning technology hasn't been perfected enough at this time. This is also assuming that this Borg is what the current collective will become. Given our knowledge of how evolution works within governments and ecosystems, it's honestly near impossible to ever really predict how the Borg will progress or how any species will progress. It's more likely than not that the Borg of the future will not resemble anything like this Borg, given all the integers that are present that forces change. Moving on though, the option to kill the Borg as a baby is presented and ultimately denied. Interestingly, Janeway refers to the baby as a whom, a person. She also states she doesn't want to kill or murder the child. Honestly, I think this is worthy of a conversation at a different time, but I do think this shows some intriguing ideals. But again, that's a conversation for another time. There is a vital piece of information that I think is generally glossed over when people watch this episode. The advanced Borg will eventually become ready to be integrated into the collective, but has not yet received commands. This means that the Borg, after the maturation process, have the ability to be individuals, to become whatever they want to be. Think on that a moment. This process isn't wholly unknown to the Borg. 7 of 9 recognizes it, which means that babies that are assimilated probably go through a similar result, just sans the cloning. The implication is that the collective has the ability to have a generation of Borg drones that are born and become independent. This opens up a possibility that the Borg collective could one day stop being a quote-unquote collective and ultimately turn into a government, a nation of people, one that might be apt to discuss and barter with other governments. It's honestly not as far-fetched as you might think. The Borg collective expands, assimilates, and evolves as necessary. We see them make drastic changes from the best of both worlds to this episode. Who's to say that they wouldn't attempt the cloning process in order to save themselves? In fact, let's say perhaps after a virus is uploaded that destroyed most of the collective due to a reckless admiral and captain who are the same person. And with the collective so hurt, the uplink to the new drones is damaged and you start having individuality brought back into the fold. Just a thought. After information would be uploaded to the drone, it would begin to have its own individuality as we've discussed, and generally allowed to do whatever it wants. I mean, we do see security follow it around, but ultimately, the drone is allowed to walk around, look hostile towards other people, including Neelix, and access panels. Additionally, most security personnel only have hand phasers versus the powerful rifles they could use. They really didn't take the drone all that seriously when you break it down. The drone would ultimately, inadvertently, contact the collective, and of course the Borg would dispatch a ship to investigate. A Borg sphere would arrive and attempt to capture Voyager. Curiously, there is a piece here that will be important at a later episode. We see the drone improve the shielding and weaponry of Voyager. This has been used as an argument in future episodes, and it's something worth noting. The Intrepid-class vessel has now been enhanced as far as the limitations of its technology will allow. Unfortunately, this wouldn't be powerful enough to defeat the sphere. The drone would beam over to the sphere itself and co-opt the controls of the Borg, destroying it. Again, something that I think we need to consider. The Borg directly interfaces with the collective. What's amazing is that he is able to resist the call of the Borg, which again makes me wonder, could the Borg become so advanced that they can not be forced to listen? That could be an interesting evolution into the Borg themselves when you think about it. After destroying the sphere, the Borg would basically commit suicide so that the collective wouldn't chase him, even though the collective has no way of knowing he was dead. And additionally, Voyager would not strip him for parts and utilize what they gained from the technology to defeat future Borg, or get home. I mean, it'd not be sporting after all to use advanced Borg technology against the Borg. I know that I stated in the past I would only be talking about the Borg collective and its history in this breakdown. However, I feel that this episode and discussion was necessary. The Borg drone would improve the Intrepid class and add what the Borg could be, which is to say, they could be free in the future. But those are my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe, and as always guys, please remember, all of our lives are a story. Make yours a good one.